And frankly, Your Honor, the mayor should know more than anyone about the presumption of innocence that he too is afforded when he dealing with his own issues. This has to stop, and my client is entitled to a fair trial and the presumption of innocence. And we're going to fight these charges, whether it's in the state or federal, to the fullest extent.
So, nice swipe she took at the corrupt Mayor Eric Adams and his personal legal problems, which, because we have an incoming president who's also corrupt, it seems that Eric Adams is going to be pardoned.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up.
Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Luigi Mangione's attorney blasted the New York City mayor as well as the feds for what she says is jeopardizing her client Luigi Mangione's right to a fair trial and the truly stunning perp walk they did last week. This occurred this morning in a New York State court as Luigi Mangione, the alleged shooter of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, was arraigned on murder charges, which include terrorism. This morning, we were there covering folks outside the courthouse, several of whom were there to support Mangione. Before we get to some of those interviews we did on the ground, and remember, support Status Coup for as low as $5 a month. We're one of the only independent outlets continually on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up. Before we get to that, let's show you some of Luigi Mangione's attorney, Karen Agnifilo-Friedman, talking about her concerns so far about Mangione getting a fair trial.
The second thing I want to make a record of, Your Honor, is I'm very concerned about my client's right to a fair trial in this case. He's being prejudiced by some statements that are being made by government officials. Like every other defendant, he is entitled to a presumption of innocence. But unfortunately, the way this has been handled so far, his rights are being violated. And as you know, Your Honor, there's a wealth of case law guaranteeing his right to a fair trial. But none of the safeguards have been put in place yet here. In fact, it's just the opposite of what's been happening. He's a young man, and he is being treated like a human ping pong ball between two warring jurisdictions here. These federal and state prosecutors are coordinating with one another, but at the expense of him. They have conflicting theories in their indictments, and they're literally treating him like he is like some sort of political fodder, like some sort of spectacle. He was on display for everyone to see in the biggest staged perp walk I've ever seen in my career. It was absolutely unnecessary. He's been cooperative with law enforcement. He had been in custody for over a week. He waived extradition. He was cooperative at all accounts.
So she is referring to Luigi Mangione being escorted off the helicopter, which brought him from Pennsylvania to New York last week with what looked like a SEAL Team 6 level of security with bazooka guns, as well as, of course, New York City Mayor Eric Adams, the corrupt mayor, I should add, having to get in there in the shot. Also, it should be noted that her and his legal team were pretty much blindsided last week. They were expecting to be defending him in state court last week. Then these federal charges, which are pretty unusual for the feds to charge on top of the state for murder charges. And it seems, we'll get to this in another video, that the DOJ got a lot of pressure from corporations and the health insurance industry to throw the book at Mangione. So they were blindsided at these federal charges. They were prepared to defend him in state court, and then all of a sudden, the federal charges came down. So she's saying she's concerned about his chance at a fair trial. Let me continue as she goes into the perp walk, which she believes puts Mangione and his defense at a disadvantage.
There was no reason for the NYPD and everybody to have these big assault rifles that, frankly, I had no idea it was in their arsenal. And to have all of the press there, the media there, it was like perfectly choreographed. And what was the New York City mayor doing at this press conference, Your Honor? That just made it utterly political. And as Your Honor knows, under Lauro v. Charles, the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit has held it to be clearly established that these staged perp walks to the media, unrelated to a legitimate law enforcement objective, is unconstitutional. And I submit there was zero law enforcement objective to do that sort of perp walk. There's absolutely no need for that whatsoever. And frankly, Your Honor, the mayor should know more than anyone of the presumption of innocence that he too is afforded when dealing with his own issues. And frankly, I submit that he was just trying to detract from those issues by making a spectacle of Mr. Mangione. And there are consequences to this. He has a right to a fair trial. And I just want to put on the record statements that the mayor made publicly about my client. Nothing saying alleged, for example. And he said, I wanted to send a strong message with the police commissioner that we're leading from the front. I'm not going to just allow him to come into our city. I wanted to look him in the eye and state, you carried out this terrorist act in my city, the city of New York that I love. And he wanted to show symbolism. Your Honor, he's not a symbol. He's somebody who is afforded the right to a fair trial. He's innocent until proven guilty. And the mayor was talking to jurors, future potential jurors that elected him. Those are the people that elected him that he is talking to and calling this man a terrorist. So, Your Honor, I just want to make a record of this and put everyone on notice that this has to stop. And my client is entitled to a fair trial and the presumption of innocence. And we're going to fight these charges, whether it's in the state or federal, to the fullest extent.
So nice swipe she took at the corrupt Mayor Eric Adams and his personal legal problems, which, because we have an incoming president who's also corrupt, it seems that Eric Adams is going to be pardoned by President-elect Trump for his corruption. But that's another story. So obviously, she's pointing out that, this massive sideshow they put on display last week, bringing Mangione off the plane, encircled by all these, cops and what look like military men with bazooka guns, and Adams puts off a perception to potential jurors. The media obviously plays that up. The media has been fixated on Mangione, certainly not the predatory for-profit healthcare industry. They don't want to talk about that, really. So I think she did exactly what she needed to do here. She is formally number 2 to New York City District Attorney Alvin Bragg. So she was high up there in one of the top New York legal offices in the state, in the city. She is very, very well renowned, probably a pricey attorney too. My assumption is the family's paying for it. And she is doing what she needs to do, which is saying that he is entitled to the presumption of innocence, innocent till proven guilty, all of that. I also want to show you, we were out there on the ground, as we always are. Please support us for as low as $5 a month, statuscoup.com/join. That's 16 cents a day. You could support real, living, breathing, independent journalism. We were out there this morning in the cold, talking to several people who, some of them outwardly supported Luigi Mangione. Others were out there sharing their horror stories. We're going to have a separate video showing you those horror stories some of the folks we interviewed talked about. But we want to show you their responses to the media coverage so far. Here is one person we interviewed discussing her thoughts on this media coverage, not of the for-profit predatory healthcare system, but of Mangione.
What are your thoughts about the media's response?
The media has always been puppets to corporations and CEOs and the government. So they protect them, they don't protect the people. They definitely don't tell the truth, that's for sure. We found that out in the past year during the genocide, which is still going on. And I've read a lot of those articles currently about this situation, and they're obviously trying to put the focus on him and making him out to be a criminal, even though we haven't even had the trial yet. In this country, it's innocent until proven guilty. And they can't change that narrative just because it suits the CEOs and the government and the corporations.
Did you see that New York State Governor Kathy Hochul is setting up a hotline for CEOs to call in if they feel threatened or scared?
Well, she takes their bribes. I mean, the governor of New York, the mayor of New York, they all take bribes. They all take political campaign contributions. So they're bought and paid for. But the people aren't. And that's why the people are fed up. That's why the people are speaking the truth. And now is a better time than any to take action.
You think you'd ever see that kind soul on CNN? You think the New York Times would quote her? I do not. I do not. That was Natalie Morales, I believe. Let me show you another person we spoke to who also had some words for the media.
What do you think about the media's response to this?
I think it's a really poor response overall. I mean, in regards to what we're focusing on, we're focusing on things like a CEO hotline, and we're perp walking him like he's a comic book villain and just spending a crazy amount of money. Like a lady got set on fire on the subway yesterday. Not many people even know about that, So I think that the focus is very poor, and even a lot of people, like I'm out here in regards to Medicare, I get it. Luigi opened up the door for a lot of things, and I will say that's a good way. I don't condone murder, but
and again, we're gonna have another video with some of these folks' horror stories that they displayed to us. It's really awful hearing some of these stories, which are just normal in America, as we live in the United Corporations of America, as you can see behind me. If you didn't see this, I also want to show you, and this kind of alludes to what they mean by the media is a bunch of puppets. Well, so is the politicians. Apparently, highly unusual, again, for the feds to also charge on top of the state for just normal murder. But apparently, part of why the feds got involved is the health insurance industry was kicking and screaming and howling at the Department of Justice to take action. Insurance industry leaned on the Department of Justice to take Luigi Mangione case as deterrent against copycat killers. Health insurance industry leaders leaned on the U.S. Department of Justice to prosecute accused United Healthcare CEO assassin Luigi Mangione, arguing a federal case against the twisted folk hero would act as a deterrent for possible copycat vigilante killers, sources said Friday. The Fed swooped in with a 4-count complaint against Mangione in the cold-blooded killing of Brian Thompson Thursday, scuttling Manhattan prosecutors' hopes of getting the first bite. Sources told the Post that the federal charges came amid pressure from health insurance industry leaders to make an example out of Mangione, though it was unclear when specified entities petitioned the DOJ. I cannot tell you how many people I've spoken with across the country on a variety of stories. Their kid was murdered, whatever, whether it was murder or corruption or some other crime. They had to call their politicians for months or years, either not getting a response to their grievance or their kids being murdered, or being basically given lip service, bounced around from different offices, but never actually getting a response or action. You kill a CEO in this country? Oh, boy. Department of Justice, their lines are open for you if you're the insurance companies wanting to call. Not so much the people. And they'll take action within a week. That's why we live in a tale of two cities, because the law is not the same for you and I versus United Healthcare or Aetna or Cigna or Goldman Sachs or Pfizer, name your company. It's vile, absolutely vile. I want to also replay this. I did play this in another video, but Karen Agnifilo-Friedman, his lawyer, alluded to the fact that the feds had swooped in, that they also were not prepared for that. There is a former federal prosecutor who is now going on the record saying that might not be, that might be a mistake, but B, it's highly unusual that you're seeing federal charges in this case, which kind of goes to the fact the DOJ took action because their bosses, i.e. the insurance companies, demanded that they take action.
And that's the dual sovereign doctrine, which says that the state can prosecute you and the feds can as well. It doesn't typically happen, so it's pretty strange or weird that it's happening in this case. And we'll get into that a bit. We have seen it when there's a potential high-profile civil case. Going back to Rodney King, right? The officers were acquitted in state court. They were retried in federal court. Some of them were convicted. Some of them were acquitted again in federal court. Two recent cases where this came up was Derek Chauvin and George Floyd. Chauvin was prosecuted by the state and the feds. And then if you remember, the McMichaels and one other individual, Roddy Bryan, were charged with the death of Ahmaud Arbery in what many folks considered a modern-day lynching in Georgia. Yeah. So that was another case. Again, not something you typically see, and this is why it's not a good use of resources. And for decades, the Department of Justice has had actually a policy on this. It was by an individual named Pettit, who was pretty high-ranking. That's called the Pettit policy, and it says that the feds don't get involved with a subsequent federal prosecution after the state has started unless there is a compelling federal interest that isn't vindicated in the state case. So if you're talking about civil rights, maybe that's something that's important. You don't want people to be killed on the basis of their race. But typically, murder is not a federal crime. It's almost exclusively a state crime. So you kind of have the feds piling on here.
Well, here there seems to be a compelling federal interest. The health insurance companies called the DOJ and kicked and screamed and howled. There's your interest. We live in the United Corporations of America. We'll stay on this and stay tuned for more videos from our interviews outside the courthouse.